So, welcome everyone to this FinTech Connect session in the Digital Transformation Group. My name is Anette. I'm an independent FinTech analyst, and I work mostly with innovation and strategy, currently very much with inclusion. And I'm really thrilled to discuss this panel today. We have a subject on why innovation culture is important to corporates. So that is both a very broad agenda and also in some ways a narrow one. But luckily, I have a fabulous panel with me today for the discussion. And I'm so much looking forward to go through this. So we're going to discuss different angles on this subject during the next 30-40 minutes. And towards the end, we will take time for a Q&A session. So participants, if you like, please feel free to add your questions in the chat, and we can answer some of them as we go through the discussion, and we can leave some time for some of them at the end of the session. And then we come back, of course, to the panel to let them round off the session. So I'm so much looking forward to this, and I will start by inviting the panelists to introduce themselves and where they come from. So Salah, since you're here on my left, would you like to start?
Yeah, thanks. Hi everyone, my name is Salah Franzen. I'm the Group Chief Data Scientist at SEB. It's a Nordic corporate bank mainly, but we have a holistic offering. And as the Group Chief Data Scientist, I am tasked to inspire the bank to become more data-driven, which I do by having my 8 wonderful data scientists, a couple of people working on data visualization and creating very cross-collaborative teams, identifying data that has value and creating new kinds of solutions for the bank. I'm very happy to be in this panel.
Great. And Roland? Roland.
Roland Fejfar. I run technology business development internationally at Morgan Stanley. Our mandate is to bring in emerging technologies into the firm, drive experimentation, and select the right partnership structures.
Great. Angela?
Hello, and thank you all for joining today's session. My name is Angela Martin, and I lead our small and mid-sized client-facing teams in North America for JPMorgan Chase Merchant Services. I'm not a data scientist, but in my role, our team is really focused on helping to communicate and talk to clients and talk to small business owners about the ways in which we can be leveraging technology and helping them grow their business and reach their goals. So really happy to be here today.
Olivier?
Hello everyone, my name is Olivier Yom. I'm based in Amsterdam. I'm working for ING Bank, and basically I have 2 roles at ING. One is to drive our fintech franchise, where we look to partner with fintechs around the world to accelerate our agenda across the globe for all business units. And next to that, also heading ING Labs, which is a place where we incubate our own fintechs, basically, where we have a lab in Singapore, in London, Brussels, and Amsterdam. Looking forward to the conversation. Great topic.
And finally, Johan.
Hi, Anette. Great to be here. My name is Yuan Lin. I work with increasing innovation capability through transformation, new technology, partnerships, etc. at Swedish Handelsbanken, which is one of Sweden's largest retail banks.
So you can see why I say this is really a great panel. We have people from all different parts of the banking and corporate world here and working with all different aspects of innovation. So my first question will be to all of you so that you can open up the discussion a little bit and target different aspects of it. And I'll ask you, what is your definition? What defines an innovation culture, and what characterizes the kind of innovation culture that you're working in at the moment? So if we start backwards, I could ask Johan to start off.
Sure. Yeah, that's a menacing task, but I'll try. So for the first part of the question, what is an innovation or innovative organization? I mean, I'd like to start off with a very simple definition of one that creates value for your customers through either combining technology with business value, or finding out new things about your customers that you can ultimately solve for. And I think for us at Handelsbanken, that's all about autonomy. That's all about having a clear mandate for each and every one of our employees under a very clear vision of where we want to be in the future, and the processes and the mindsets for interacting in an ecosystem as well.
Great. And Olivier would like to continue. You're in a different setting, working with the labs.
Yes, that's true. I think at ING, the way we look into culture, obviously is essential for sustaining innovation and not being only a short-term focus. So I think there are a couple of things which for us are very important, and it starts most and foremost with the leadership, right? So if you don't get that leadership, and if it's not fully embedded in your strategy in a page, so to speak, then it's not going to work. So it's important to have this long-term commitment from the leadership, and I think long-term is difficult, right, in this day and age. So it's even more complicated. So it takes courage from leadership to sustain innovation, because you don't get the fruits in the very short term. So you need to be able to make that long-term investment, right? So I think I do remember when ING started the Orange Direct, I think about 20 years ago. I think for the first 10 years, we were very much loss-making. So it took a lot of courage, to sustain those losses for 10 years to get to eventually a great success. And I think this is number one, probably. I think number two is about making sure that you have the right structured approach, right? So the right methods around, throughout the organization. I think following up what's just been said, I think with the customer in mind as the first. So for that, we have developed our own methodology, how we want to innovate throughout the entire organization. So we are training all our employees and our colleagues how to apply those innovation techniques in their daily jobs, not only looking at disrupting the world, but really how do you make sure you embed these techniques in your daily life everywhere, basically. So that's for us very important to have that global approach, consistent approach. And maybe a third one will be inclusion, right? So it's not, for us, culture of innovation is not just a few hundred people, essentially doing crazy stuff on the side, but it's really to make sure that we have internal inclusion as well as external inclusion, right? So including internally means making sure that 50,000 employees of ING understand what it means and contribute to the entire effort, because it's embedded into our daily lives and our purpose as a company, and also making sure that we are open to the great ideas around the world and looking for partnerships, which I'm sure we'll elaborate in a few minutes. So that's really the combination of all those factors that we think are essential for the innovation culture to thrive within an organization.
And that is why this is a great question for opening up the discussion. And I see that we have now Andreas Berner with us. And Andreas, we will just give you a few moments to land here and tell you that we started with the first question. So we'll come back to you last when the others have started. So I hope that's okay.
Thank you.
Angela, would you like to go next?
Oh, sure, absolutely. And this is a terrific panel, by the way. I was just taking a note for one of our panelists there. But the one thing that I would say in my mind, I think the question was really around how do you define an innovation culture? I think for us, it's always important to really dimension what we mean by innovation. And I think oftentimes you hear the word innovation and you immediately default to this notion of some big dramatic, groundbreaking change. ING's example I thought was a great one. So I just took that note, and I'm going to remind my leadership that 10 years. sometimes greatness takes time, right? But for us, it's really important to really dimension what we mean by innovation. It can be small, incremental improvements to an existing process or the way in which we interact with the client. or it can be something that's like brand new and groundbreaking and game changing. And we want to be participating, right, in both of those arenas. And so for us, that's how I think about innovation. So then to draw forward, Annette, to what do we mean by innovation culture? It's how do we create the environment that really fosters the individuals within our groups to collaborate with one another, to innovate and bring about change, if you will, in both ways. So that's how I think about it.
Certainly many aspects of innovation culture coming up here. That's really great. Roland, would you like to continue?
Sure. And this towards the end, it's always getting a little bit repetitive. So I'll try to kind of navigate around what some of my co-panelists have said. But look, to pick up on the point that Angela made, innovation happens every day across all of the organization. So I don't think there's one innovation culture as such. From my vantage point, which is from the kind of transformation office, we look at the more fundamental and more long-term innovation. And specific characteristics that apply to that view are predominantly the time horizon that was mentioned as well. It takes patience. Mm-hmm. Also a blank sheet approach to just sometimes just not look at what you have, but just kind of look at it from a blank sheet of paper. A front to back thinking to really, that's connected to the blank sheet approach, to really think about things from end to end rather than just certain parts of the value chain. It certainly also requires, and I think again it was touched upon before, an agile work style to be much more iterative and much more kind of to shorten the time to market and also adaptive to the changes in the market environment. And with that, it's also important to have a strong cross-divisional collaboration, and that's predominantly between technology and the business, which traditionally hasn't been the case, particularly in large financial organizations.
Thank you so much. Salah?
Yeah, so I'm the next second to last panelist. I'll try to come up with something innovative. So I think when I think about the sort of culture of the bank where I work currently, I think it was sort of founded in order to service entrepreneurs. And my feeling is that every single employee in the bank where I work is kind of an entrepreneurial person. So for us, it's really sort of being able to empower the employees to get the time to try out new things. We do a lot of the stuff that I'm pretty sure everyone does, like hackathons and gigging, so that you get to learn about other parts of the bank where they might be doing something very different, but you might be able to bring some innovation back to yourself. And of course, the partnerships and everything that everybody else has mentioned. But for me, the core is that we need to have employees that are really empowered to continue being entrepreneurs. Because I think when they meet clients and they work in their daily life, they know what hurts, they know what the opportunities are.
Great. So Andreas, very much welcome to you. We've been looking forward to hear from you as well. If you'd like to introduce yourself and where you come from and give your thoughts on what defines an innovation culture and why that is important to corporates.
Thank you, Anette, and sorry for being late. I had connection problems. It's COVID-19 time. So I'm Andreas Börner. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer of SmartStream. SmartStream is a big software provider and service provider. We serve around 2,000 banks worldwide, and I'm leading the innovation lab of SmartStream, and we are trying to find new ways to optimize the business of banks. And when you ask me about the innovation culture that we are looking for, interesting is that many people confuse using the latest technology with innovations. What I find often is when I go to meetings that we thought they would have a certain outcome, when you are in that meeting and you let people have an open space and be open about ideas and rethink, it's completely a different outcome, and it allows innovations to happen. So I think it's very important to allow the exchange of ideas, to give people time. Strong collaboration is important. Many things have been said already, and it's not about digitizing or digitalization, right? It's not a straightforward process. It's more open. We have to accept that there's no immediate outcome of innovation. It might take a while until we see an outcome, and some things don't even show an outcome. So it's more an open culture. It needs to be innovative.
So thank you so much. I really think you have touched upon so many aspects of this, coming from technology as a driver or an enabler at one end, and into the courage of starting out working in a different way, working with entrepreneurs, working with the internal organization, inviting people, creating the room, but also working towards servicing customers, and importantly also the time aspect, the fact that this can be a short-term problem, but also solving long-term changes. So it's not surprising that we can have many ways to look at it. And I was thinking that we might start with how do we organize for innovation? What can you do to create all of these successes that you are looking for in the way that you work? So it could be both a question of how you organize in your own department, but also how you work across departments in your organization. And I don't know if you would like to start, Angela.
Yeah, it's a great question. Before we even tackle the notion of what's the right organizational approach, what's the right operating model, at JP Morgan Chase, we tend to focus first on what's our mission. What is the client need? What is the client objective that we are trying to serve? And then that then also helps to inform how best we might be able to then organize around that opportunity or meeting that client need. And in my particular group, we've approached it in a couple different ways. One is more challenging. Well, they're both hard. Like, everything's hard, like, about innovation. Let's just say that. One, I think, has been more challenging, and that's been creating a culture where everyone is feeling a spirit of entrepreneurship, or where everyone is feeling empowered, if you will, to share ideas and share feedback. And so that's like the broad-based, approach, where you try and create a culture where all of your colleagues, all of your team members are contributing in hackathons, and they're, sharing their voice through listening posts, and they are sharing ideas on ways in which we can improve. We are always really hitting the drum hard to try and solicit that type of engagement. It's really hard to do, really hard to do, and hard to sustain. And you don't always get the dramatic leaps in improvement to drive customer experience in a meaningful way. So the other approach that we've taken within my group is we've actually set up, and I think we heard from a couple of our panelists already, a team who's focused on innovation, modernizing of our set of solutions and our processes. And that group, though, has to be really nimble, small, but empowered. One of the things that we've done, and I'm sure you'll hear from some of the other folks here, Roland, I know has probably, more expertise in this area than myself. But one thing that I've observed that's been helpful for us in that regard, with that approach, if you will, is really giving the team what I'm going to call like the emotional safety net of trying new things. And it's okay, not everything's going to be perfect, and not everything's going to be a hit, but as long as we're learning along the way, good. But let's get the learnings and let's move as quickly as we can. So we've really taken both approaches, one of which is trying to get broad-based, broad sweeping engagement across the whole group. And the other has been to really focus strategic investments within a group And I think, again, just giving them really the emotional safety of knowing that we're here, you know, we want new ideas. It's okay if not everything's like a grand hit, but we need to learn and continue to move forward. So those are the two approaches that we've taken from an organizational perspective.
So, Roland, I was thinking, you mentioned very much working on a long-term perspective. Is it more difficult to organize for innovation when you have a longer time perspective?
Well, look, I think you need to, this was, I think the point I wanted to bring across, there's different time perspectives, and I think innovation happens on a daily basis, but there's also a longer term perspective, and that's the perspective that the transformation office covers. So I think in the tune of what was said, transformation is, or innovation is not just about technology. So from a transformation office perspective, we look at three angles. We look at innovation from three angles: technology, processes, and people. And with regards to level of difficulty, it's probably the other way around in terms of the order. But starting with people. But so from a technology perspective, we're really here to provide expertise, tooling, best practices, and governance to the rest of the organization to help adopt transformational technologies and to drive innovation across the organization. From a process perspective, something I already mentioned before, it's really around the kind of blank sheet end-to-end approach. But in order to understand how the organization runs currently, we need to first have a look of what are the current existing processes. So from the process side, we're very much looking at kind of existing processes, to process mining and task mining, to better understand the current processes, and then think about a redesign from an end-to-end perspective. Because at the end, what we don't want to do is to just kind of improve broken processes, but really we try to see is kind of, can technology be leveraged in order to reinvent the process itself? And then probably most importantly on the people side, and I think, again, something that was touched upon by Angela, is it's really around leadership, and it's around kind of the right mindset to risk-taking. And so I think we have a strong focus around leadership sessions that kind of change a little bit the approach around how do you take risks, and that a certain level of risk taking is okay in a safe environment. So as you know, many co-panelists here, we do have also an innovation lab, but it's for instance outside of the kind of Morgan Stanley technology environment, to ensure that, you know, if something goes wrong, it doesn't affect the rest of the organization. And so there's greater scope for experimentation. But yeah, I mean, certainly the people side, I think it's very important, because that mindset needs to filter through from the leadership to kind of the people that do it hands-on. And I think that safety net and confidence that it's okay to experiment is very important.
I see nodding going on here. I was thinking there's perhaps one perspective that you mentioned, Johan, on the I think you mentioned autonomy. So the question of striking the balance between collaboration and autonomy.
Yeah, that's absolutely one of the things that, you know, I think everyone is struggling with, and I think it's wrong to assume that those two are opposites. I think it has more to do with, you know, finding a balance between how much are you working on empowering your internal processes, your internal people, and how much are you, you know, working with finding ways to opening up your internal process to bring in an outside point of view, to bring in partners. And I mean, for us, I think when we talk about empowering people, we talk about empowering people also to make the decision to go out of the company, to, you know, bring in a partner on a project, to work with a customer directly. And you know, it's kind of bringing those two together in a way that actually makes it work. And I mean, it's over time, you're gonna have to have some kind of portfolio management, some type of overview over how you're going to to go about, working with innovation, because obviously empowering an individual only gets you so far. At some point, you're gonna have to bring in larger players as well.
Yes, that makes good sense. When we look at this perspective, I think you already touched about it, Roland, on separating the environments and also creating labs. We will come back to partnerships in a little while, but we have a nice question also from the audience asking, what role does security have in an innovation culture? And you've all mentioned the need to be able to fail. I don't know if any of you have, I'm sure you all have somewhere in the organization. Is that something you come up against as innovators in a corporate? Salah, would you like to?
Yeah, maybe I can just comment shortly. I think when you work with innovation, there are a lot of different things that you need to take into account. And I think having like really good security experts that you feel that you want to include into the whole process already from the beginning is quite crucial. I mean, it's the same with compliance, it's the same with risk control. We are banks, and having sort of the right people that also are innovative in those areas is absolutely crucial in order to be able to innovate truly. Yeah, so security is definitely core. I mean, we're banks. I don't know how you could not do that.
Any of you want to add something to that? Otherwise, I was thinking that having several innovation labs present and knowing also some of the culture that you have been working with would be really great to touch upon the need for partnerships. Because when I look at the change of finance over the last many years, partnerships are becoming still more important, and working with platforms and working with fintech startups is everyday business for all of you. And how do you design and work with an innovation culture that encompasses more of an ecosystem? I wonder if you'd like to start out on that, Olivier.
Sure. Maybe just to come back quickly on the security, I think it's also a great domain to innovate, right? So not only we need to be, of course, safe and secure, but it's also there are many things that we think we can do better and, let's say, accelerate on that space. And being in a, say, compliant by design, or even though for the most disruptive activities you want to be, I think as Roland mentioned, more on the arm length side of things, still you cannot afford to not be secure, right? So it's always a nice balance between reusing the great, security capability of the bank, while at the same time being far enough to be able to take some more risk, right? So that's a very interesting balance to find. So back to maybe the question of partnership. I think within ING, so today we have 200 partnerships, right? So we have many partnerships, but I think for us it's not so much about the number of partnerships, it's really about the impact that you create with your partnership, right? So at the moment, what we want to do is a few things. We want first to focus, right? Because there are so many topics that we could go for. I think what we've done is selecting the 5 to 6 what we call value spaces that really want to focus for the years to come, right? So that's one, and being very clear about those value spaces so that we attract the right conversation, and also not entering other conversation, otherwise you are very much lacking focus. Second, I think it's about being very clear on the rules of engagement. So yes, partnership is great. We want to short-term talk to market and benefit from each other, and to have this win-win-win situation where it's a win for both sides, but also for most and foremost for the end customer, right? But what does that mean? So how do you engage? How do you select the right partnership? How do you say, making sure you have success KPI from the beginning, and you actually commit to monitor those KPIs and to act upon it. So if things are not going as planned, that you actually, rightfully so, stop the partnership and say thank you to each other. I think we have stopped more than 100 partnerships in the last 2 years. So for us, it's also a learning process, and how do you make sure that you get into a global partnership? So at the moment, what we're trying to do is to really focus the number, making sure those partnerships are truly global, at least multi-business units, multi-countries, because this is where you really create impact. And for us, this is now this kind of rationalization effort that we're in to make sure that we really focus on business domains and the right partners, whether they are fintechs, whether they are big techs, whether they are with other banks, right? So that's let's say a few rules that we like to take. And technically speaking, it's also making sure you have the right API, let's say, focus, so that you can really plug and play. And so for that, we also have the classic tooling of having partnership investment via our venture arms, creating our own fintechs in our labs. So that having the right tooling to make sure that we select the right type of partnership when it makes sense, but also, and I think for us at least, the biggest challenge is defining the rules of the game, but also applying to ourselves. So when is it a good time to partner? So when do you build stuff yourself? When do you actually buy a vendor? And when do you truly partner and co-create? And having the right decision tree and with the right criteria, it's something which is not easy to do. At least we find it not easy to do, and to apply it consistently across different business units. That's for us the biggest challenge, but also where the biggest upside is.
That makes good sense, but it must also be a challenge to create the right culture across so many different partners like you have there, including to some extent the financial authorities also working with sandboxes and the potential of designing for compliance. Andreas, would you like to add something from your experience as well?
So I agree, partnerships are really, really important. We try to find partnerships where everybody benefits. So we are a software provider, we can provide the technology, we have data scientists, but the sweet spot is somewhere in the middle typically. So we are partnering with banks that bring in the bank know-how, that know the workflow good, that know the daily business. And what I find is that whenever people with different backgrounds are in the same room, that is when innovation happens, right? Because they look at things at such a different perspective, and it's so interesting that once they find the same language, and that takes a while, yeah, because techies speak a different language than people in banks. But once they have found the language, then the magic happens. And I saw that so often. So partnerships are important to us, but it also needs some cultural. It needs some time to adopt to a partnership culture. You need to find your way to agree to things and to trust and to speak openly, and how to share data. It's not simple to share data these times. So it needs a lot of legal and management skills, and partnerships are not easy to set up, but once you have a good partnership, it's so fruitful. Yeah.
So that makes very much sense, that the challenge also to create a culture is to create a common culture while people come from different backgrounds, and sort of balancing between the positives of diversity and the challenges of not understanding each other's. I don't know if Salah or Roland would like to comment on this as well.
Yeah, sure, I can comment. I think for me, the main partnerships that I'm focusing on from my side is more the collaborations with academia. There is so many interesting applications going on, and I think this probably especially in the AI machine learning area, it's really sort of exploding, and there's constantly every day something really cool and new that comes out that could potentially disrupt banking. So what we're trying to do is really collaborate with a lot of excellent researchers. We have this massive AI autonomous systems and software program funded by the Knut and Alice Wallenberg Foundation in Sweden, which really aims at sort of seeing to it that Sweden still has a competitive advantage within all industries, so not just financial services, but all industries. And I think that's kind of what's pretty cool with any kind of innovation that you're working on that's digital, that yes, I mean, the end product needs to be specific for your client, but the kind of research and the models and the algos that go in behind it could be quite common for different industries. I mean, we all have employees, we all have some kind of time series that do something. For us, it's transactions for our clients, maybe. For a big company, it might be like sensors in a factory. And finding like really talented researchers and being able to tap into their brain and have collaborations with them, it's usually it's really, really fruitful. And it also enables us to kind of borrow in massive brains that do thinking with us, and it's super fun. Yeah, so I can recommend that. Researchers and partnering with academic researchers is really, really fruitful.
I'm so glad to see so many nodding heads around the panel here, because this is really a topic that's close to my heart. So I'll take care not to dive too much into that. But this has you can say that the financial sector does not have the same tradition as do some other industries in this area. So it's really great to see that it's getting a hold as well. On the subject of partnerships, we have now another question, which is perhaps more on the agreements, but I'm sure that one of you might be able to cast some clarity over that. The question from the audience asking on the IPRs and whether there are discussions over what to own. So perhaps Roland or Olivier would like to comment on that. The rights to an innovation. And who owns it?
Look, it's a great question, right? So I guess IPR meaning IP in this case, right? Correct? IP rights, right? Okay. So no, it's a great question. So I guess it depends. So for instance, if I look into ourselves, there are a few things. Either we partner with something which is already existing, right? So then it's more like a vendor approach. So then there is no IP conversation, because you just source something which is already existing. It is not your IP. This is the IP of your vendor, right? So that's clear. Then if it's your own, so let's say something that comes from the ING lab, for instance, right? And we have several of those scale-ups, and then we want to spin out maybe or join forces, right? And this is where there are multiple models, right? So, and we have experience in many of those models, licensing the IP, having joint venture, sharing the IP rights, keeping the IP ourselves, and then entering into an agreement. So it depends on what is it that you could also have IP with exclusivity for some period of time to experiment a model. So there are different shades of form, and then there is the co-creation from the start, right? And if you do that, then it's really about, okay, what type of IP do you want to own for how long, defining the right between partners. So what we have seen is that we don't have a one-size-fits-all strategy at the moment. It's really more custom-made. So unless it's very clear from the start, because you're just using a product already existing where the IP is already clear, if you are part of the making of the product, this is what we feel is that it's very important from the start to have the right IP conversation between partners, right? So instead of starting quickly and then having that conversation later on. So that's basically one of the maybe the lessons learned, that, or the advice that we will give is it's better to maybe take 2 or 3 months to get those agreements clearly in place, having it clearly agreed, and then take it from there. So, but there are many different ways of doing it, but that's definitely the basis for a sound partnership in a co-creation situation. Absolutely.
I think that was a very nice response to that question. And in the view of time, I'd really very much like to move on to a different aspect also of working from an innovation culture. And I think I'd like to come to you, Angela, first, working with customers, co-creation with customers and organizing an innovation culture, not with professional partners, but with your direct customers. Is that something that is part of an innovation culture as well?
It certainly can be. And I'll just use our current environment as I think about COVID-19 and what that has led to within the client base that my team and I work with. If you think about small and medium-sized business owners, my goodness, they're like they are the example of what innovation can be and how quickly they're able to make adjustments and adapt to changing conditions. And within weeks, we saw small and mid-sized businesses changing their business model, identifying and unlocking new streams of revenue, and looking to partner with their financial partners, banks, as well as software companies, business applications that help them run in different ways. And so we've seen that over the last several weeks or months rather, and that trend just continues for sure. The other thing that I would say culturally within our firm that I've observed in the last several months has been our employees have been far more active and far more vocal about ideas to help our client. And that to me is really just the pure essence of where innovation can really come to life, when the people closest to the client, closest to the problem, closest to the opportunity are sharing their observations real time with our innovation partners. It has just created a really rich feedback loop, and one that will likely sustain in a different way than what we maybe had in place before. So that's one of the, I think, the most valuable learnings that has come about thus far is how we've been able to really connect the field to our technology partners, to our innovation partners, to rapidly iterate and deliver new capabilities to our clients. And our clients, to your point, have also raised their hand to say, hey, we've also identified an opportunity, an area to explore, how can we partner together and help other companies along the way? And so that's been another really positive, as we look for positives, that's been one that I'm really appreciative of.
So I see quite some nodding around my little screen here. Anyone wants to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I could just kind of comment on that, because I think that's one of the most fascinating aspects of working with corporate customers, rather than retail ones, that it's the opportunity of partnerships is always there. And I mean, obviously there are two aspects of that kind of long-term relationship with a customer, where one part is obviously kind of creating and focusing for us at Handelsbanken, especially, I think, focusing on building creating and maintaining a long-term kind of personal relationship with the owners, with the staff, with everyone within that company. And I think what we've seen over time is that the better, relationships we build on the customer side, the better the partnerships are then on the corporate side as well.
A great comment. There's so much that I would like to leave more time to discuss. So it's really, you really are adding so much knowledge to this discussion. But I think Anette touched upon a question that was also somewhere on my list, because one of the issues that we have seen come up, at least on the payment side, is that a lot of companies and a lot of people have needed to adapt during this COVID-19 struggle. So are you seeing COVID-19 as supporting and developing your innovation culture, or causing a challenge? I don't know who would like to comment on that. Roland or Salla, perhaps?
I can comment, sorry, it took me a while to go to the unmute button. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I think in challenging times, that's when you probably need your bank the most, and it's probably the time when you need to be the most innovative. And I mean, I can mainly speak for Sweden, but we had this massive attempt to kind of give relief to the corporates that were really struggling from the government. But that didn't really target all of the corporates. So we had some corporates that were struggling anyway. So we actually ended up like creating a completely different company where we're servicing these corporates with short-term credit. Not just it's funded by APAC, but many other partners as well. So I think we really try to be there for our clients in any way possible. And I think our CEO tends to say that. I probably shouldn't quote him. I will say that when times are really hard, that's when we kind of excel. I think it's kind of in our DNA. But yeah, it's the entrepreneur hearts.
Coming from a different perspective, Andreas, do you have a perspective on this as well?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about what is happening right now is that banks and financial institutions, they find it hard to set up new hardware or new software on premise. So many of the banks now have a very strong cloud strategy in the last month. And what is really nice in terms of innovation is that before that time, the big problem within big organizations was that the data was very siloed and very separated throughout the organization and in different applications. And what we see in SmartStream now is that because there's such a movement to the cloud, it's much more centralized. It's at one location, and that's a boost for innovations. Because if you think what the big innovation topics are at the moment, it's machine learning very much, and blockchain too. And that has a lot to do with data being made available. So what we see at our end is that the COVID-19 crisis really made big corporates to more centralize and cluster their data. And then we in our innovation lab can do much more things with that data and be more creative, make workflows better. So it's really a boost for us. It's very interesting times.
May I add just one comment? Just want to build on that. I just want to state the obvious. I'm sure everyone watching this panel is going to say, okay, duh. But our customers have also adapted. So my 82 and 83-year-old parents are on Zoom. That would have never happened. People are banking and using their mobile applications, and they're looking for software to enable activities that they may have done in other ways in the past. And so that's also unlocked a whole new market of opportunity, because you now have a consumer or a small business or even a larger corporate who's more nimble and looking for different ways in which to work with you or to partner with you. So I had to state the obvious, but that's like the real gold mine if you can really serve a need and meet the client who's now operating in a geography that they otherwise would not have been in. So just had to say that. And then to me, the crux is creating broader and more access, right? And so we're fortunate that we're all Wi-Fi enabled with the technology and tools to be with one another today. Wi-Fi when it's working, but to have the ability to be with one another here today, if we're able to broaden access, across geographies and across socioeconomic bands, creates even larger markets for all of our companies to be able to tap into.
So I actually think, thank you, Angela, I actually think that was a good, perhaps a bridge to the end of this conversation, because we're coming to the end of our time, and I was thinking if you could have some sort of brief answers from you on a question that's fairly large, saying what are the challenges that you're looking at towards the future, and what is the potential? Is there a way to capture this moment of momentum that we are experiencing at the moment? So I'd like to start with you, Roland, and come to Andreas afterwards.
Sure. Sorry, my connection interrupted. It's about challenges, yeah?
Yes, I was saying, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly,
okay.
Challenges.
Look, I think from my perspective, and it's probably going to state something obvious, and I think it's both a challenge. Well, it's first an opportunity, but also a challenge, and it's really the regulatory framework. I think that will have a significant impact on the direction of innovation, particularly in financial services, given it's a highly regulated industry. And so, and I think given that a lot of the innovation is really also around, obviously, digitalization and global scale, particularly if you work in a global institution. And so having, not necessarily these frameworks be fully aligned, but having some consistency among the different frameworks is, I think, very important, because otherwise it just kind of hampers the rollout of innovation every time you come to, quote unquote, a border, right? And so I think there, again, I think the partnership talking about partnerships, is very important. And I think luckily a lot of regulators have actually realized that the exchange with the industry is very important in order to create the right framework that obviously protects what needs to be protected, but at the same time also enables innovation to kind of flourish and have a little bit of room to experiment.
Thank you, Roland. Andreas?
Yeah, so I agree with Roland. There are the regulators. We are in a regulated business. But there's the other side to that, right? Also regulators, we are working with regulators and they also need innovations. They need, on the one side, they are against all our AI and machine learning technology. On the other hand, they need it because they have to compute so much data that they cannot do it without that intelligence anymore. So, and that brings me, I think, to the biggest challenge, because regulators and also clients, they see the risk in innovation, right? Whenever we innovate something or whenever we bring new products to the market, it's not just about this super new shiny product. It's also what's the negative side to that. And I think the negative side to today's innovations is privacy. Privacy is a big topic we really need to take care. Banks are very good in that. They have been excelling the privacy of customers for many years. But still, these new technology, machine learning and AI, they make the customers more transparent, the process more transparent, and we have to be very careful with all the technology to put it in the right hands and really let humans benefit from that, and not just look at revenues and money, right? In the end, it's the customer that should benefit from it.
That's a good point. So fairly short comments on challenges and potential, Johan?
Yeah, sure. So going back to what Angela said, I think we need to realize that customers have adopted to kind of a new normal. And I think that new normal is a digital one. And I think that the kind of main danger that I see going up ahead now is that digitalization that promotes commoditization. So I think for financial institutions now, it's the big challenge will be, how do we differentiate ourselves digitally as well? And I think kind of innovating towards being differentiated is one of the next big things.
Good point. Olivier?
Yes, I think we're thinking about this. I think three things. First is, how this existing situation will last. I think because I totally agree with Angela that, the pandemic allows many things, allows access, digitization, volume of data that allows you to do stuff, but it also, on the other hand, put a lot of pressure on budget and let's say the means that people are willing to innovate, right? And often an innovation budget are the first budget to look at when you look into how you improve your cost structure, right? So it's an opportunity but a threat at the same time. So the impact of that are still to be assessed, I would say. So that's definitely a challenge, I would say, as well as an opportunity for innovation. But next to that, I think specifically on the regulatory framework, I would specifically put the accent on banking beyond banking, because one of the things that to differentiate ourselves, the frontier between banking and what we call adjacent banking or beyond banking becomes more and more diffused. However, the regulatory framework is still very much banking regulatory. So if tomorrow any bank would like to launch a competitor to Google, for instance, it has to be it falls within the entire banking regulation, right? Which basically prevents anyone to do just that, right? So otherwise you have to spin out and be completely far away from being a bank. So if you are to compete, if you are to, let's say, expand the range of services that a bank is willing to provide to be able to differentiate and truly service the customer, that is something that the regulator have to think about, how to make sure that there is a level playing field between, let's say, the entire verticals for the benefit of the end customer, right? And that's, for us, I think, a very important for next 5 to 10 years. And lastly, I think digital currency is definitely something that will have huge impact, right? So those are the three things I can think of.
They're very good things, Roland. So I'll just remind you fairly short so that we don't get caught off in the middle of everything. Angela and Salah, for you too.
No, I think I've shared. I'll be just really quick. I think just maintaining the pace and maintaining a culture to continue to drive and innovate and ideate remain difficult, and they're challenging, and I don't think that that will change for us. So, Salah.
I'll try to end with a positive note. I think one of the coolest things about this time kind of is that you're able to travel to so many different places in one day. This morning, I was interviewing AI researchers and having a discussion with 6 different researchers about what we could be doing together. And now I'm in this panel, and that would in normal circumstances not have happened. So I think it's really an opportunity to reach out across kind of the globe and find new ways of cross collaboration.
That is really a great way to end the conversation. And I'd like to thank you all panelists for sharing your time and your insights. And I really hope to be able to meet you in one way or another in the future. And thank you so much for the participants as well. So thank you, and stay tuned for the next sessions and FinTech Connect as well.